Stephanie Lazarus was a respected LAPD detective sworn to uphold the law, but her life took a chilling turn when jealousy and obsession led her down a deadly path. In this video, we'll uncover how Lazarus, once a trusted member of law enforcement, brutally murdered 29-year-old Sherri Rasmussen over a love triangle gone wrong. We'll explore the dark details of that night, the investigation that eventually unraveled the truth, and the punishment Lazarus faced after years of evading justice. Her story is a haunting reminder that even those who are meant to protect us can betray us in the most shocking ways. Welcome to Criminal Profiles, Stephanie. Lazarus was a determined woman who knew how to climb the ranks in the LAPD. Born in 1960, Lazarus had always been driven, and by her mid-20s, she was already a detective specializing in art thefts, a role that demanded intellect, attention to detail, and an ability to outthink criminals. Her colleagues viewed her as hardworking, capable, and dedicated. She had a reputation of getting the job done. Despite her professional accomplishments, Lazarus's personal life was a different story. In the early 1980s, she met and began dating John Retton, a civilian working for the LAPD. The two became close, and for a while, it seemed like their relationship could blossom into something more. However, as time went on, John began to grow distant. He eventually ended the relationship, telling Lazarus that he had met someone else, Sherri Rasmussen. Sherri Rasmussen, a 27-year-old woman with a vibrant personality, was different from Lazarus in many ways. Sherri was an outgoing, warm person, someone who easily made friends and had a life full of potential. Lazarus, on the other hand, was still holding on to her feelings for John, unable to fully let go. John and Sherri's relationship blossomed quickly after they met, and soon they were planning to marry. Lazarus, however, could not accept this change. The end of her relationship with John left a void that she was unable to fill. Her jealousy over Sherri's relationship with John grew. She began harboring resentment and bitterness towards both John and Sherri. This emotional turmoil, mixed with the professional pressures of her job, slowly began to erode her once promising career and her mental state. Stephanie Lazarus' obsession with John Retton and Sherri Rasmussen grew over time. When John and Sherri started dating seriously, Stephanie found herself unable to move on. Her feelings for John were not just a thing of the past. They lingered and intensified. She could not accept that her former lover had moved on, especially with someone she considered a rival. Lazarus would frequently find herself reminiscing about her past relationship with John, unable to accept the fact that it was over. In addition to the emotional pain, Lazarus also struggled with the idea of being replaced. As a detective in the LAPD, she was used to being in control, handling situations with precision and authority. But this was different. In her mind, Sherri Rasmussen had taken away something she had once felt was rightfully hers. Her emotions were raw, and she began seeing Sherri as the barrier between her and the man she still desired. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a destructive obsession that consumed her thoughts. Lazarus' personal life began to overlap with her professional life. She was still working within the LAPD, and as her obsession grew, she became less focused on her duties. Colleagues noticed that she seemed distracted at times, but none of them realized the extent of her emotional turmoil. In the quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, Lazarus would replay memories of her time with John, fixating on their relationship and what had gone wrong. The more she thought about it, the more irrational and dangerous her thoughts became. In her mind, Sherri had to be eliminated for John to realize that she was the one he truly belonged with. The idea took root and began to consume her entire being. There was only one way Lazarus thought she could win back John's love: by removing Sherri from the picture entirely. As time went on, Stephanie Lazarus became increasingly obsessed with John Retton and his fiancée, Sherri Rasmussen. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It had evolved into a full-blown obsession. She began stalking Sherri, quietly watching her every move, studying her habits, and even following her around. Lazarus knew everything about Sherri's daily routine. She knew where Sherri worked, where she lived, and even where she went for errands. At first, Lazarus tried to remain unnoticed, but her fixation on Sherri was growing. She would often sit in her car for hours, watching Sherri's apartment, waiting for an opportunity to confront her. Lazarus's behavior became increasingly erratic. She couldn't bear the thought of Sherri being with John, and she grew more resentful with each passing day. Despite her obsession, Lazarus tried to maintain a professional demeanor. She was still a respected detective within the LAPD, and no one suspected that the woman who solved cases and worked tirelessly for the department could also be harboring such dark thoughts. Her colleagues had no idea that the confident and sharp investigator they knew was slowly unraveling inside. It wasn't just stalking that took over Lazarus's life, it was a sense of entitlement. She felt that John was hers and that Sherri was the obstacle standing in her way. And as she watched John and Sherri get closer, her desire to be with John morphed into something far more sinister. Lazarus began planning how she could remove Sherri from John's life once and for all. On the night of February 24, 1986, Stephanie Lazarus saw her chance. After weeks of obsessing over John and Sherri's relationship, she had finally reached a breaking point. She had become convinced that the only way to win John back was to eliminate the woman who had replaced her. Sherri Rasmussen, a young woman full of life and promise, had to be taken out of the picture. Lazarus knew where Sherri lived and had even learned her routine. She knew that John and Sherri were spending the night at Sherri's apartment. It was the perfect opportunity for Lazarus to act. She grabbed her service revolver from her LAPD-issued gear and drove to Sherri's apartment. Once there, she waited for the right moment. When Sherri was home alone, Lazarus entered the apartment, fully prepared for what she was about to do. She attacked Sherri without warning, brutally bludgeoning her with a blunt object before shooting her 3 times in the chest. Lazarus then staged the crime scene, making it appear as though a burglary gone wrong had occurred. She hoped that this would divert suspicion and allow her to get away with murder. The next day, the police began investigating Sherri's death. They initially believed it was a robbery gone wrong, as Lazarus had intended. No one suspected the trusted LAPD detective who had known both victims. The case remained unsolved for years, until cold case investigators revisited it and unearthed shocking evidence. Years passed without any solid leads in the investigation into Sherri Rasmussen's murder. The case seemed to grow colder by the day. However, in 2009, the Cold Case Division of the LAPD decided to take another look at the murder. The case had remained open for more than 2 decades, but new investigative techniques and the advancements in forensic science led to a breakthrough. Cold case detectives decided to revisit the crime scene and the evidence collected at the time of Sherri's death. They focused on DNA analysis, a method that had advanced significantly since the murder. It was during this investigation that they uncovered a crucial piece of evidence, a bite mark on Sherri's arm. When forensic analysts examined the bite mark, they were able to match the DNA to none other than Stephanie Lazarus. The detectives were stunned. Lazarus, a respected LAPD detective, had been one of the last people to see Sherri alive. The evidence pointed directly to her. In 2009, LAPD investigators arrested Stephanie Lazarus for the murder of Sherri Rasmussen. Lazarus, who had once been a trusted member of the force, was now facing charges of first-degree murder. The case that had stumped investigators for years was finally solved. But the truth about the woman responsible for the murder would shock the public and the law enforcement community. After her arrest in 2009, Stephanie Lazarus was charged with the murder of Sherri Rasmussen. The case went to trial in 2012, more than 20 years after the crime had been committed. Lazarus, once a respected member of the LAPD, now found herself facing the consequences of her actions. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and obsession. They argued that Lazarus's motive for the murder was clear. She had been unable to accept John Rutan's relationship with Sherri Rasmussen and had taken matters into her own hands. The prosecution claimed that Lazarus had meticulously planned the murder, showing premeditation and a complete disregard for human life. Lazarus's defense team tried to argue that the murder had been an act of emotional turmoil, that Lazarus had snapped in a moment of desperation, but the jury wasn't convinced. The evidence, especially the DNA match from the bite mark, was too strong. In March 2012, after weeks of testimony, the jury convicted Stephanie Lazarus of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. When Stephanie Lazarus was sentenced in 2012, it was a moment of closure for Sherri Rasmussen's family, who had waited decades for justice. Sherri's family members, especially her parents, were able to finally mourn their daughter's death with the knowledge that the woman responsible for it was being held accountable. Lazarus's sentence, 27 years to life, was a stark contrast to the future she had once envisioned for herself. She had gone from being a successful and respected detective to a convicted murderer, imprisoned for the crime of passion that had shattered the lives of so many. Although Lazarus was eligible for parole after 22 years, the emotional impact of the case was felt by all who knew Sherri Rasmussen. The trial was a reminder of how deeply jealousy can affect someone's actions. Lazarus had once sworn an oath to protect and serve, yet she had let personal feelings lead her to commit an unthinkable crime. In 2023 to 24, the California Parole Board initially recommended her release, but after emotional testimony from Sherri's family and careful review, the decision was reversed. As of now, Lazarus remains incarcerated, and her story is a chilling reminder of the consequences of obsession and betrayal. The case of Stephanie Lazarus shook the Los Angeles community and the nation. How could a respected detective, a woman who had sworn to protect and serve, commit such a heinous act? The revelation of Lazarus' motive for murder left many speechless. It was difficult for the public to comprehend how someone who had spent years in law enforcement could allow their emotions to lead them down such a destructive path. The media frenzy surrounding the case was intense, and many questioned whether the LAPD had failed to notice the warning signs of Lazarus's emotional instability. Could anyone have predicted that the woman who once upheld the law would be capable of taking a life so coldly? It was a question that haunted both the public and her former colleagues. Lazarus's trial was also significant because it brought attention to the idea of obsession and how it can take hold of someone's life. In Lazarus' case, jealousy over her lost love consumed her to the point where she was willing to kill to reclaim what she believed was hers. The case of Stephanie Lazarus became a case study in obsession, betrayal, and the dark side of human emotion. The story of a respected LAPD detective who could not control her jealousy was not only a shocking one, but it also raised important questions about mental health, emotional control, and the impact of personal relationships on professional lives. While Lazarus may have once been a model cop, her story has become a cautionary tale. It serves as a reminder that anyone, no matter how successful or respected, can be overtaken by destructive emotions if they are not careful. The impact of Lazarus' crime on Sherri's family will last a lifetime, and for Lazarus, it will likely be a lifelong sentence of regret. As the story of Stephanie Lazarus continues to unfold, it leaves us with many reflections on the nature of obsession, love, and the pursuit of justice. It raises questions about how far someone is willing to go to possess someone else, and whether the desire to win can ever justify taking another life. What does justice mean when the person who committed the crime was once a trusted figure in society? How do we reconcile the actions of a murderer with the image of a law enforcement officer who once swore to protect and serve? These are questions that linger long after the case has been settled. And the story of Stephanie Lazarus is a tragic reminder that obsession can be more dangerous than we ever imagined. What do you think about the case? Can emotional instability be blamed for such extreme actions? Or does personal responsibility play a greater role in cases like this? Let us know your thoughts.